One of the most exciting and skill-testing parts of cEDH is the stack war. Today, we're breaking down how to come out on top when everything is on the line. Joining me today is Max P., host of the Win and In podcast, and one of the masters of the stack. We'll walk through the plays, the mindset, and the tips that give you the edge. Also, make sure to stick around until the end of the video to hear about how you can win a free deck from Liquid Luck. Hello and welcome everybody, this is Bite Size MTG. I'm Zachary Adler, also known as Snack, and today we're going to be talking about how to win the battle that is the stack, the end game of mid-range hell, the demon that you must slay, the final boss, and I have no one better to talk about it with than Max P. So thanks so much for joining me to chat about this.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. Thanks for having me on. This is a good conversation, something that doesn't get talked about nearly enough, like you said, and I think it'll be good to dive into it for me too, to kind of put my thoughts in order too.
Yeah. I was like, I really have not seen anything on YouTube. I would be cool to hear like a pro, like a 60 card player talk about this, like an article or something. So maybe Sam Black will hear this and he'll be like, you guys are dummies and this is how you actually do it.
You're doing it all wrong, guys.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You also run a YouTube channel, the Win and In podcast?
I do. It's called the Win and In podcast, and you can find us on YouTube or Spotify, and kind of similar to this one in a sense that just talk about cEDH all the time. We do some deck techs. We get into tournaments and what's going on, and the ever shifting meta of cEDH.
Yeah, I personally am a huge fan of your channel, and I've been watching you since you were doing Colors Are a Crutch. So it's super cool to have you on my channel now after all this time.
Yeah, it's cool to be here with the champion of the Invitational, man.
Yeah.
Still riding that. You got to be riding that high still, man. You gotta still feel great.
Yeah, I feel like overall it was just such a cool way to bring something home for all of California, and it really resonated like I don't want to say a team win because it wasn't like collusion or anything, but it was the whole season leading up to that point felt like all the dominoes just lined up, and I had such a cool community behind me. And it really did amount in such a cool way. So yeah, I'm definitely riding the high a little bit.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I actually just had my first tournament win in this season, and I took a big break from Blue Farm. I played solo Thrasios, so no partner. Didn't win on that. Scrubbed out on that. And then I played Rog Thras.
Rog Thras. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Sense.
Just out of curiosity, have you been playing any tournaments recently?
I literally just came back 2 days ago from the UK championships.
Yeah,
out in Birmingham, England.
Birmingham,
was a blast.
Sick.
Birmingham, England. Yes.
Is that where? Yeah. That's where Peaky Blinders is, right?
It is. Yeah. And they
cool.
even have like a Peaky Blinders restaurant at the airport and everything.
Oh, so cool.
They're on theme.
The Garrison.
Yeah.
Yeah, sick.
It was cool.
So I'm curious about this tournament. Like, how did it go for you? Did you have any games that really stood out?
First of all, it didn't go as well as I really wanted it to. I did not win.
Post.
Yeah, I made it to they did a top 40 cut, and I made it to the top 40 cut, so I got that far. Just variance is really what killed me. I think the deck was good. I think I played well. Pure bad luck, and you asked me before, what game stood out, and I think it really kind of demonstrates the luck factor, and it was. I think it was my round 3 or round 4. I was playing against a Timna Kadama list and Timna Crom and Crick, and I was in 4th seat again. It's like, oh god, here we go.
Yeah.
But I managed to grind the game out, got into the game, was looking really good, and then the Timna Kadama player got a Lurking Predators into play.
Oh god. That's so cool.
And it goes to Crick's turn, and Crick has a Sidisi in hand, and he's about to win. So he casts a meaningless spell, which caused the Lurking Predators to flip, and it was Elish Norn, right?
God.
So turns off
7 mana?
this. Yeah. No, the 5 mana one. The
ETBs.
The Mother Machine, no more ETBs. So basically kills the Sidisi line completely.
Yeah.
Right. So Kirk's like, well, this doesn't do anything more. Pass turn, right? And I'm like, all right, but now I've got the win, right? Because I got a top deck tutor, and I'm about to top deck tutor for what I need to win the game. I got this. We're there. I have Timna, I have Thrasios in play. I have a Mox Amber. I go and I cast that top deck tutor. Lurking Predators flip, and it is a Solitude, right?
Oh,
Double trigger Solitude kills my Thrasios, kills my Timna. I'm like, oh my god. All right. But I'm still okay. I think I can still get there. Turns out I couldn't quite get there because the Mox Amber is now off, so I don't have enough mana to win the game anymore. But we have like 30 seconds left in the round. I have a silence in hand. At this point, at least the worst case scenario is I can silence him in his upkeep, and this is a draw. No problem. We got this. Goes to his turn. I cast a silence. Lurking Predators flip. cEDH on his side. And if you know Timna Kadama, cEDH with Kadama, game over. It just straight up wins the game.
No more spells.
Oh my God, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Right? But fortunately, the Crick player is like, don't worry, I got you. I've got this immersion zone. I can crack this immersion zone. I had Deadly Relic the Elish Norn, so the Elish Norn was gone. And he's like, now I can cEDH and get an answer. And I'm like, cool. All right, let's do this. Cracks the immersion zone, cast the cEDH, Lurking Predators flip, Aven Mind Sensor.
Oh, God.
And we're like, oh, okay.
It's cool. I'll just lose the game, I guess.
Okay. What can you do? There's nothing you can do at that point.
Yep.
Right? You just let it go. You lost.
Yep. There's so many games like where you can't even be mad at the variance because it's just like they just have everything and they had the perfect answers. Like that's how it felt in my tournament game. Like my top 16, I literally flipped exact answers to every problem I needed to deal with. And I was like, that's just, that's how it goes sometimes. And you gotta roll with the punches, I guess.
Nothing you could do. Yeah. Sometimes it's just out of your hands.
Yep. Completely agree. I as we're talking about the stack, Lurking Predators is like a pretty cool card, especially in a white deck with access to cards like Grand Abolisher and Ranger Captain.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then that deck it's especially good because he runs the Rector, and he can just get Lurking Predators off the Rector trigger. So
yep. I know you were innovating with what's the card called? Aether Vial for a while. And I've just been thinking about that card in relation to these stack battles a ton. I know we're a little off topic, but like flipping a Grand Abolisher into play just seems so good right now. And doing that with a Rector with like sneak attack, in red decks also seems busted. And I chatted with Kellen a couple days ago, and he's trying Pyre of Heroes out and really liking it, just to go Esper Sentinel into Grand Abolisher or Timna into Technomancer. Like these just uncounterable creatures into play kind of thing.
Yeah, the other one is Monster Manual. Is the other one I keep seeing.
Yeah, that's like a big
thing.
flips card, right?
Yeah, but it's not that bad. It's a 4-mana card, right? It's a 4 mana and then you can pay 2 to flip anything into play. Just completely uncounterable.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. I really hope we see more of this kind of stuff, and like the commander that does it. There's like a manifest commander in Simic.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Because Hire plays it all the time.
Yeah, Hire plays it, and then
is it Zimone? It's Zimone.
Zimone, Mystery Crafter. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And then Brazy Tree. I don't know if you know him, but he's someone I met at the Invitational. Super cool dude. Really, really good player. And he plays that deck too. So yeah, just excited to see like some new innovation coming out of the decks that are just putting creatures into play. I would love to try the Timna Kodama Lurking Predators tech because that sounds like a blast too.
I mean, that's what Kodama does in general, right? Gets around the stack war because it just puts things into play. Yeah, this is a talisman. You don't need to worry about this talisman. Just kidding. It's a Grand Abolisher.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I think Logan Doan was doing a lot of like Kodama Silas stuff. I think.
Oh, I thought he was doing Thrasios, right? Thrasios Kodama, I think.
He might have been. I'm not sure. I just know he was in the Kodama camp and really like enjoying that kind of deck, and now he's just playing Blue Farm. So another convert.
Yeah.
We've been talking about the stack, and what I guess we want to say is like at the higher levels of cEDH, games can go hours, right? Like they can go 11 hours if they have to.
Please
you don't want them to, but sometimes they do. And what happens will be that in these non-11-hour games, like games where there are time limits and constraints, a lot of players have figured out that with all the flash enablers we have access to and all the instant speed interaction, fighting on the last turn of the game with time being called is a way to win the game without pushing before you have to. And it really focuses on, like, I think Ken Bauman early days was saying, like, push second. Like, you don't want to push first in cEDH. And people have been taking that kind of to the extreme. And so we're seeing these long, drawn-out stack battles. Thank God we have a 20-minute overtime now because they cannot be that long. But, I mean, I've had games, I know you've had games where they've gone multiple hours on a single turn and a single stack. And no, like we said, no one's really talking about how to navigate these kinds of things, right?
Yeah, and really what's happening is the stack battle is happening before the stack battle happens. You're sitting there, you're drawing cards, you're building up resources, and you're just thinking ahead, like at some point, someone's going to push. And as soon as they do, that's when the battle will happen, and you're trying to keep a catalog of, what are all the things that I can do in that stack battle? What sneaky interaction can I drop on over the top to win it? And you really, like, the longer the game goes, the more complicated the stack that's coming is going to be. And you got to be ready for it.
Yeah, it's like the accumulation of these value engines or something that new players sometimes don't see. Like they're like, oh, he has a lot of cards in hand, or oh, he has a Rhystic Study and a Smothering Tithe, right? Like we're trying to solve for cards and mana in the game primarily. And if you can do that in the long term, and play these long concerted stack battles out with the most resources, you tend to come out on top. And one thing that people need to do is to evaluate when these stack battles are happening. Generally, they're towards the end of the game, but they can be started off anytime. And also, who's poised to be ahead? Like, how do you evaluate both the board state and the cards in hand to say, oh, this player is definitely going to come out of the stack battle ahead. And so we have to be able to interact with them first, or to misdirect where we need to interact and choose our points of saying, okay, I'm going to cast my spell now, or I'm going to pass priority here. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just massively complex. So to kick things off, I kind of wanted to ask you, when did you really realize that these stack battles were going to be such a critical part of playing cEDH? Like, was it the whole time you've been playing, or was it when Flash Enablers got printed and started really being utilized? Like, when did it click for you that, like, oh, this is going to be super important?
I think maybe when I was playing Turbo-Nos decks, when I first was really getting into cEDH seriously, when I was playing Florian, which is just Rakdos. And, when you're playing a low-colored deck like that, you don't have as much access to stack tools as you do when you have, like, a blue deck. But you do have some tools, right? You do have some pieces that you can use. Yeah. And I realized that really the only way for me to successfully win games was that I needed to only interact with the stack at exactly the right time. Mm-hmm. And if I wasted any piece of interaction at all, I got overwhelmed, right? So, and the games that I won came down to the games where I was able to hold those pieces until the absolute perfect time. Mm. And when I did that successfully, I won. And when I didn't, I lost. Mm. And more that kind of became apparent to me that operating and navigating the stack correctly is really the bottom line of how you win cEDH games.
Yep. When you get past, like, oh, I just had a turn 2 Nas that no one had an answer for.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and sometimes you have to create stack wars. Like, you have to, create a stack war that you're going to win. Mm-hmm. So that when it gets back to your turn, you're clear to go, right? Yep. So it's so important to be able to work those stacks.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like this shifting game of who's the problem, right?
Yes.
Like, I cast a Grand Abolisher. I'm the problem. Everyone tries to counter me. And suddenly someone casts a Veil of Summer or a Silence. And you're like, oh, alarm bells. Like, can't let that resolve because there's a Born Upon a Wind coming right after that. So now we're fighting that player. Right. And then as card engines and mana engines start to pump, each player shifts responsibilities and roles of being the problem that needs to be dealt with. And all 4 players, if they're good, know that is a very liquid position and one that is not solidified. Some players that are less experienced will not see that and be like, oh, he has a Grand Abolisher on the stack. And we're like, well, that's like 30 spells down. So that's never going to resolve.
Right, so. Exactly. Right. If we don't stop this when it's empty right now, that Grand Abolisher doesn't even matter.
Exactly.
Right? So, yeah, and knowing when your friend is now your enemy and when your enemy is now your friend, right? Because it's constantly shifting in the middle of stack wars. I mean, Jorman is famous for doing the here's a friendly silence. Yeah. It's here to help you.
Yeah.
And knowing, wait. I know what you're doing, Jordan.
That's a lot of open mana for silence to be cast with.
Yeah. Silence, huh? Yeah.
So it's kind of like this build up, like we talked about. Like, the resources build in the early game, people establish their engines, and then we come to the crux where either time is going to go out or someone begins the stack war. Someone says, here's my Abolisher. Walking through this whole thing is pretty complex, but we want to just say, like, what are all the factors, I guess? Like, it kind of comes into, if we can say there's 4 players in this game who are all knowledgeable of what's going to happen, how do we get into like starting this war? And like from your perspective, how do these positions and roles shift where one person becomes the threat and everyone else is dealing with them? And like, like it's a super complex topic. So I'm just like, how do we even break this down?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to think about is, what are the interaction pieces that you have available, right? Because, people tend to think of it as just counterspells, and it's not just counterspells, right? Totally. In fact, it's very rarely is the start of the stack a counterspell. It's usually like you said, a grand abolisher or something like that, right? So you've got multiple different types of interaction, and maybe that's where we start.
Yeah.
Right. You have, the silence effects. That's one. You do have counter magic. That's two. And then you have removal as a third. And then there's really a fourth type, which is just straight up win conditions.
Yeah.
Right. And, via flash enablers usually.
Yeah. So it's right. So we have, like you said, we have interaction, we have silence effects. I would kind of group like uncounterability, like Veil of Summer type things into silence effects. Like that has to be answered. We have flash enablers, we have win conditions. And then one fun one that has really been coming up a lot for me are incidental spells that don't really look like interaction in the moment. Like the 2 that I think of are Brain Freeze and Orcish Bowmasters.
Yes.
Because like with multiple draw engines at the table and very high storm counts, a Bowmaster, if it resolves, will win the game, right? Like it's going to just stop people from drawing cards, or people can draw cards to kill someone else.
And learning, I think a key part of this is understanding when in the stack to insert
deploy
these different pieces, right?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned Bowmaster, for example. If the start of a stack is a Grand Abolisher, right? If that's on the bottom of the stack, right? Getting your Bowmaster into play above that Grand Abolisher, but before all the big draws happen, is critical, right?
Right. Yeah. And like, for me, there are some pieces that are like must answer pieces. Obviously, I think the biggest one of these is a silence. Like if you don't answer a silence, you lose the game. That's sort of the highest echelon of danger.
Yep.
Below that for me are things that are going to kill me immediately, i.e. Bowmasters, Brain Freeze, those kinds of things will just kill me. And so I can't allow those to resolve. And then below that are flash speed, like something flash speed to resolve, because then they have access to their whole hands. But I've been in games where people let flash speed, like a Valley Flood Caller, resolve, and then they try and fight over the top. Like my finals game was this exact thing that happened. It started with a Bowmaster and it began. So yeah, what do you think about that? Like the sort of like scaling levels of danger and things you need to answer.
It's every once something goes on the stack, it complicates everything that happens above it. So for example, a Brain Freeze goes on the stack. There's a storm trigger that's associated with that Brain Freeze. And once that storm trigger goes off, all of those are on the stack at that point, right?
Yeah.
So if you, for example, have a Veil of Summer in your deck, you need to get to that Veil of Summer above that Brain Freeze, right? So as soon as that Brain Freeze goes on the stack, it warps everything above it.
Yep.
Same thing with the Bowmaster. Bowmaster comes down. Once that Bowmaster actually resolves, it changes everything. Because now if I'm feeding someone's heuristic study to try to make things work, now I can't.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes you want to let things resolve, because you want to get to the next thing, and you can't. Like everything below that point doesn't exist anymore.
Yes.
That Bowmaster becomes a marker, and everything has to happen above that, because once it resolves, it disables half of what you want to do.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, like you said, like a marker of like a point of no return. Like we can't let this resolve or we lose the game. And so
I think there's also special resources that you hold in reserve because they're the stack breakers, right? Mind Break Trap, Flusterstorm.
Yeah.
Those make a huge difference because you can hit multiple things all in one shot, right?
Yes.
It's very tricky to hold on to that when you really want to use it. Like you really want to use that Mind Break Trap because it just solves all of these problems. All these problems get solved right now if I just do this Mind Break Trap.
Yeah.
Right. But if you do it too early, and they're like, one counterspell stops that entire effect, right?
Yeah,
you really have to have balls of steel and just sit there and hold it, Yeah.
So like we talked about ascending threat, like silence has to be countered, right? This also kind of gives us insight into like what we want to start stack battles with, which in my opinion is sorcery speed things. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's usually only one time. Like there's one sorcery speed spell, so it's almost irrelevant. You have to start it with something like a Grand Abolisher if you feel confident you're going to win that stack. And then the next thing that comes after that, like the next thing you want to be casting, are generally counter spells like a Swan Song or Fierce Guardianship or a Force of Will, because these are not, these can be interacted with, right? Like they can be, they're not like, and you're okay with them being
Expendable
buried.
interaction.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're expendable interaction.
Yeah. And then the next echelon from that is, and I don't know how to break this down exactly, but for me, it's like, when do you deploy your Flash Enabler? When do you deploy the Stack Breakers, Flusterstorm, Mindbreak Traps? And then for me, Silence is like, I never want to cast a Silence until I'm absolutely sure there's nothing else that's going to get cast after, right? Because that's my way to win.
Yeah, because then you try to win once your Silence resolved, it's all systems go.
Exactly.
Right, and you don't want your Silence to be buried so far into the stack that you'll never get to it, right? Ideally, you're trying to find the point where you think reasonably there's not so much fight left that there's no hope of getting back to that Silence.
Yeah.
Like you can still anticipate a little bit of, back and forth. Like, maybe at that point people have used a copious quantity of counterspells, but they haven't used their removal yet.
Yes.
So you get to that place where like you deploy the Silence and they don't have more counter magic, but everyone then starts using their removal spells on your board and they blow everything up.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's okay. Let that happen. Does my Silence resolve?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. It's kind of like everyone's like, oh fuck, we're about to lose. Like, let's draw people as many cards as we possibly can right now so we don't lose to this Silence. And this is where I see cards like Orm's Chant and Revel in Silence becoming much more popular, because people are understanding that these spells, if they resolve, grant so much agency in game with all these draw engines that are floating around, that having multiple of them means that I get to have 3 chances. Like I can Orm's Chant someone early, right? Like we're like, oh, he has a Grand Abolish on the stack, I'm going to Orm's Chant him, and then other people will protect this Orm's Chant because you're like, hey, he's winning the game. Like we got to stop him. And then you're like, oh, I have 2 more Silences, and no one knows. And so just to solidify for people listening, and tell me if you agree or if you have like notes on this, but you kind of want to start Stack Wars off with your expendable interaction. So these are your blue counter magics, Force of Wills, Swan Songs, etc. The next step up from that is that you want to start including your Stack Breakers. So the Flusterstorms, the Mindbreak Traps, maybe the Brain Freezes as well, the Bowmasters. The next step up from that is, for me, it's like if I have multiple Flash Enablers, I might want to put one in right here, like at this next stage. And then after that, it's Silence. And then after that, your final Flash Enabler that lets you win the game. Does that sound like a correct like hierarchy of interaction?
For the most part. I mean, sometimes you'll swap that Mindbreak Trap and that Fluster and push it up a level. Like you try to hold them and cast a Silence while holding the Mindbreak Trap. Is great. You'd love to be in that position, but I think generally you're right. Another important thing to remember is Pact specifically, right? Pact of Negation. The trick to using Pact carefully is you want to use it in response to that sorcery speed thing that starts everything. Because, if that Pact resolves, whatever they were doing is over, right? And that means that they don't want you to resolve that Pact, right? So the fight will inevitably happen over that Pact immediately. Conversely, if you use an answer to that sorcery speed thing, and then you're trying to Pact the answer to the answer, that's not a good place to be, because they generally speaking are going to be like, yeah, that resolves fine, and then they go back to fighting, right? So that using that Pact correctly is a critical skill, and easily screwed up.
Totally agree. Yeah, it has to be the action spell. Is like how I like to think about it. Like the spell that they really want to resolve, not like a few steps down the chain where they're like, oh, you can counter my Fierce Guardianship, and now I'm in a Flusterstorm, right? And now I have a Pact trigger to pay. Yeah. Another cool like just tip or tech piece I have is like if you have something buried on the stack, you can always counter your own spells, and you can also use cards. So like one cool one in Blue Farm is an offer you can't refuse. Like,
yes, I was just going to say, yep.
Yeah, like if I know something is buried and I either want it in my graveyard for some reason, like maybe I have a Breach resolved and I want it to be off the stack and I want it to be back in the yard so that I can cast it again, you can use an offer you can't refuse to refund yourself on mana and go up a mana, as well as to put something off of the stack and into a zone that you can access it for whatever way you could do that, right?
Like I run Colossal Sky Turtle in TNT, and one of my favorite interactions is, there's a stack war going on, and I have a piece of counter magic that's countering something that has now has 3 different other counter spells pointed at it. So my counter spell becomes irrelevant. I will now offer my original spell. I get 2 treasures, and then I can Colossal Sky Turtle, get back that counterspell, and use it again. Right?
Super cool.
Those are tricks that really give you an edge in those wars, right?
Yeah.
That you wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah. Another cool tip is if you can resolve an endurance after some of the stack has resolved, then all those counterspells are in your graveyard. And if you have something like a Thrasios, or, if you just are like, well, I'm out of counterspells, this is a great way that you can just refund them immediately and put them back in your deck and be able to keep going. Yeah, exactly. So that's a cool piece of tech. So that's kind of like the order of interactions, as I would say, like kind of a rough guide of like, when do I want to put the certain spells on the stack? When do I want to hold certain things for? And the next part of this that I want to talk about that I still struggle with a lot is how to shift threat assessment around the table with good players. So it's like, let's say I start off the stack war with a Grand Abolisher, right? There becomes this, and we'll talk about this later, but the whole bluffing and sandbagging and brinksmanship game that ensues. And someone says, all right, well, I'll bite. I'm going to force a will the Grand Abolisher. And then, you fight a little bit, and it's curious, like what's the inflection point that occurs when someone else starts to become the threat? And why do they do that, from your perspective?
Yeah, and typically it's Ristic Study that's the problem in these situations, because someone put a Grand Abolisher on the stack and there's a fight happening. And while the fight is happening, one player's drawing cards and drawing more cards and drawing more cards and drawing more cards. And you're like, whoa, wait a second. Yeah, we're stopping this guy, but now you have 38 cards in hand and you're sitting there quietly smiling. What's going on over there?
Right.
And you realize at that point, like, you're in this, it's a terrible place to be.
Yeah.
Where you become aware that you've really lost the game either way, right? If you stop this one player from winning, then the next player is set up to win and you're screwed, right?
Yep.
So at some point you have to recognize before you quite get to that point where, the UK guys say it best. Like they have this saying, they just say, not my fight. Right, not my fight. Right, that's what they do. They reach that point in the game and they sit back and they go, not my fight.
Sick.
And they pass on game winning spells because they understand that at that point in the game your threat is now doubled. Right.
Yeah.
You stopping this player doesn't save you, doesn't do you any good. It doesn't help you as a player to stop one player from winning if someone else is going to win anyway. Right.
Yes.
It does nothing for you.
Yes.
Right. So at that point you push all the onus on that player who's been drawing all those cards to either interact with the stuff that they're sandbagging, or to give you information. Right?
Yes,
for them to say, look, I understand that from where you're sitting right now, I look like I'm about to win the game, but I have been drawing lands for days.
Yeah,
here's my hand. See,
yes.
I'm not full of shit.
Yeah.
And then you have the information you need to keep going. But if you do nothing, if all you do is keep interacting and you get no information and you don't force them to do anything, you will lose that game every time. Right?
Yep. I completely agree. I think, and that's something I really want to talk about more is that whole sandbagging, noticing when people are ahead on resources and when you have to force them to interact. But for this point here, I want to kind of say like when does the responsibility or when does the threat change for you? Like, let's say that it's a situation where we're all interacting at instant speed. There has to be a winner in this turn. That's usually when, because like, for example, if the Grand Abolisher scenario, if I play the Abolisher, you interact, another player interacts, another guy has a Ristic Study, like I'm going to see the writing on the wall that I'm going to get 3v1 unless I believe I have enough interaction to push through. So I'm probably going to pass. The Ristic Study player who's drawn a bunch of cards doesn't have to interact right then and doesn't have to push unless he thinks he can. And then it's pretty obvious that he's the threat. But let's talk about the games where it's like we're in time, we have 20 minutes of overtime and everyone's fighting. When do you notice like, oh, this person was a threat and now this person's the threat? Like, is it those game-winning spells like the silences and the the flash speed enablers that really like change like how you view the threat assessment?
Well, the flash enablers definitely change the whole dynamic. As soon as someone has a flash enabler on the field, like their capabilities change completely because now they're not only looking to not die, they're also looking to win. Right.
Yes.
At that point.
Yeah.
The other thing is just looking at open mana. Like, so don't think about the flash enablers that are in play. Think about the flash enablers that could be in play.
Yep.
Right. They've got suspiciously they have a blue and colorless mana sitting there just open, and they're they're just sitting on that, and their hand's getting kind of big, and they haven't played any of their free rocks. Like I don't see any. There's no Mox Amber. There's no Mox Diamond in play, and like they don't have any of that. But they have 15 cards and a blue and a colorless open.
Yeah,
they're a threat, right?
Could be something in that hand.
There could be something going on there, right?
Yeah.
So and again, it's all about information at that point. Like, I'm very verbal as a player, so I'll say right then, like, I'm worried about you. What are you doing over there? And I'll politic the table to also be terrified, unless you give me some reason to not. Right? You need to give me some information so I don't have to worry.
Yeah. So it's the open mana, and then it's the big danger spells. Like as soon as someone casts a silence, there's a conversation that's had that says, "Are you winning on top of this silence, or are we going to pass the turn?" And in the situations where there is no other turn, silence becomes this person has immediately become the threat. Right now, we all have to interact with them. So silence is one. Any flash enabler on the stack immediately makes you a threat as public enemy number one. I think Bowmasters in some scenarios can kind of make you the threat. Like this is a must counter spell. Are there any other spells that if they go on the stack, you're like, boom, this is the problem?
Well,
like
an easy one is big rituals. Like if someone casts, for example, a Culling the Weak, and they mysteriously, now they're going to have Adna's men up, for example.
Yeah.
Right. I want to understand what they're doing with that ritual. Like I need an answer. Like, okay, you're casting a ritual. Why? Like, why do you need a bunch of black mana right now? Counter spells don't cost black mana. Like, what are you doing? Yeah, tutors is a big one, especially black tutors in particular, because you don't know what you're getting. Like, if they're casting a mystical tutor or an enlightened tutor or something, or a creature tutor, like generally speaking, unless it's to the battlefield, you're going to get the information that you need. If it's a black tutor, you're not, right?
Yep.
So
completely.
Those are things to be scared of.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like tutors, rituals, silence effects. These are also cards like Veil of Summer. Like if someone tries to cast a Veil of Summer in the middle of a stack battle, that's a bad thing because then their spells can't be countered for the rest of that turn. And it's only Mindbreak Traps and silences and trying to fight to basically win on top of them that's going to work. So that's dangerous. The other thing, like you said, are tutors. To the battlefield tutors, like if someone's trying to resolve a Court of Calling for 3, it's probably a Ranger Captain of EOS. Or if it's on their turn, it's probably an Abolisher effect that's just going to stop the stack interaction. So those are things to look out for. The next kind of transition is what you were talking about earlier, which is how do we as players identify when to say, not my fight, and when to step into the table and interact? Like approaching that topic is frickin' tough. One anecdote I'd share is when I was, again, in the Invitational in the finals match with Andy and Corwin and Sterling. So it's these 4 Blue Farm players who are, we all, like, Corwin and Sterling are newer players. I'm not sure if they qualified last year for the Invitational, but Andy was literally top 4 last year in the Invitational and number 1 for most of the year. Like, arguably maybe the best player in the world, definitely a good argument for being the best player in the States. And I really thought, part of the game that we were playing is when we got to that stack battle, I wanted to be hyper open with my interaction, which is something that I don't know if a lot of people want to do, but it made it so that I didn't have to interact. I was like, I have 2 counter spells, and Corwin had at this point resolved a Flood Caller. So it was like he was the threat, obviously, but it was the role of the threat was transitioning a lot because people were casting flash enablers, people were casting silences, and so it kind of bounced around a little bit. And what I did was I was like, I have these 2 counterspells, I will use them when we need to use them, but not before that. And so it was kind of like me saying, I'm going to pass priority until I absolutely have to, and until I know that you guys don't have more interaction. And that partially is reliant on trust, but it was how I chose to play it, and it worked out for me in the end. But I'm just curious, like, how do you navigate this sort of, I don't even know exactly what to call it. It's bullying, it's brinksmanship, it's greediness. Yeah. How do you do it?
It varies a lot based on personalities in the pod, I think. But one of my tricks or things I like to do is I spend a lot of time talking about the dynamics of a particular spell, like a counter spell, for example, where I say, yes, I have this Flusterstorm. Yeah, I know I could use it on the spell right now, but think about it for a second. It's better for me to hold it. It's better for you to use your thing first because that makes my Flusterstorm more powerful. Right. Or I have a deflecting SWAT, and this is really not the right time for me to use as deflecting SWAT. Yes, it's an answer. It would solve this one spell in the stack, but if I hold it, then I can use it to redirect their win line, for example, or whatever it is. So really talking about how the counterspell or the piece of interaction works and why I think that you should use your thing first. And of course, some of that is, honest truth. Like some of that's true. Like it is better to use the Flusterstorm later, points. Right?
Yeah.
But also, fundamentally speaking, is whenever you can, whoever uses their counterspell last usually wins, right?
Yes.
So, whenever you can find a reason to push someone else to use theirs first, you really should, frankly.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And, you made a good point earlier, being open about what you had, builds trust at the table so that, people, you tell them, like, I don't think I should interact here. And there's some, trust there. Like, people don't think you're just trying to get away with it, even if you are.
The Invitational was a little bit scuffed just because the timing. Like, we had, I think, about 20 minutes left, and the judges would not give us exact time. And so we were all just casting spells, like, very, very fast. And there's not a lot of room to politic in that sort of scenario, which I think there's pluses and minuses to that. Like, we really can't have 11-hour games. That's just not something anyone wants. And I know we're working a lot with the time limits, but I personally have actually really liked the 80-20 thing that's been going on in Swiss. And then in semis and finals, I think having an incentive to be first seat and, win if time is called is shitty in some respects, but also it really incentivizes winning in Swiss. And it's a little bit of a tangent, but getting into semis and finals, if you're first seat, I don't think it should be anyone's goal to time the game out, but it does give you an advantage in the game, and it's one that you've earned because you've gotten more points in Swiss rounds, which is other players, it's their onus to push. It's not on you.
This is a tricky one, man. This is a really tricky one, and one I experienced just now, like in the UK Championships, because the way they did it was the top 40 game was a timed round, where whoever was highest in Swiss moves on if there's no winner after 80 minutes.
80 minutes, wow.
80 minutes plus the 20 minutes extension, just like normal.
Yeah, sure.
So it was like a Swiss round, but it was a top 40 game.
Top. But the first seat was like the highest seated, right?
Correct.
It wasn't random.
And what ended up happening was we ran out of time.
Yeah.
And first seed moved on, and I lost.
And
it was tough because, I'm very used to, top 16 games, top 4 games where I'm like, okay, now I can slow down.
Yep.
Really focus, up the collaboration with the table, make sure I'm making the correct action for every piece of interaction. I'm not pushing too fast and being impatient. Like I really slow down, and that really cost me in the end because I had to rush, decisions at the end of the game.
Yeah.
Couldn't get there. And for me, I really, cEDH is a tough thing because if we did things the way we really wanted to, like if we made cEDH pure and good and wonderful in every way it should be, like you wouldn't have a single elimination game anyway. You would have a series. Right? It'd be like, like hockey, it's a top 16 game, right? Best of 5, right? And we'd be sitting there for days.
Yeah.
Right. But you can't do that. Like it just doesn't, like you can't have people come out for a tournament and stay a week. Like we're not pros, like we're just guys.
cEDH, that would be a fun thought experiment though. Cool tournament idea if anyone wants to get 60 people who have a week.
Just every tournament's a month long process, right?
Yeah.
You get 2 weeks for your top 16 game, and then 2 weeks for top 4. It's tough. It's tough. You can't do that. So the games have to end somehow. So it's always going to be a little bit imperfect. I hate the way those end, but what can we do?
So I have never won a game because I was first seed and time was called, but I have lost a game that way, and it felt awful. And it was the first time I'd ever heard about it happening, and it was in Colorado at Mortal Kombat, and my pod went to time, and everyone had flash enablers like in player on the stack, and it was just over, and it sucked. Like it sucked so much because we had, I think it was 100 minutes with 20 minutes of overtime. So really, like you said, not enough time for a semifinals style of game. Like at that level with that good of players, you have to give budget more time. That's just like, that has to be true. But when I've started thinking about the system more, it did make sense to me if there's allotted time that is like enough for a player to win in, because it incentivizes winning in Swiss and not just trying to draw your way into the semifinals. I think that's really great. It also, the biggest thing is it solves like 5 to 7 to 11 hour games. It's 3 hours, we're done. First seed goes on.
Yeah, I think that's the compromise, is that you need a reasonable time limit. Like,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be completely unlimited, but it should be long enough that there's time to have a full, meaningful game before you're like, okay, guys, enough is enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So just to like dovetail back to what we were talking about, which is, when do I hold my interaction? When do I use it? How do I don't really like the term bullying, and I don't think we should be bullying people into using their interaction, but there is an aspect of like brinksmanship where it's like, I'm passing on a game-winning spell, and if you want to interact, you can, but I'm not going to do it. And we're in these situations. For me, it's like I'm always doing like cost-benefit analysis in my head, and like I'm trying to evaluate all the resources that are used. I'm saying like, okay, player 1 has a Rhystic Study. Player 2 has an Esper Sentinel and a Lotho and a bunch of mana. Player 3 has a Smothering Tithe and a Rhystic Study. Player 4 has a Mystic Remora, and or maybe player 4 is like Thrasios with like 2 Biomancer's Familiars, right? And it's like, that's a lot of analysis to do in your head, especially when all these spells are going on the stack and like priority is being passed to you, and you're like, I'm trying to say, like, I'm trying to keep a count on how many cards are in people's hands, how much mana do they have available to them. How do you try and navigate those situations where it's like, we're in the final turn, someone's going to win or we're going to draw, I'm passing, I'm keeping priority? Like, a lot of those games do go to draws, but in the games that, don't, where it's like, oh, we have a ton of time left and this is definitely the last turn, like this is the stack to end all stacks. How are you managing your priority and your greediness? And, when you say like, not my fight, how does that come down for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's some of it's just feeling it out by your gut.
Yeah.
Some of it is, I will constantly in those turns be asking people what's in their graveyards, like what's in their graveyards, what's in exile, because I want to know what they've used. Because you can look at their board state, open mana, and know to some extent what spells in existence in that deck they could have to deal with this, and then I can look in the graveyard and see which of those are already used. Yeah. And if I'm in a situation where I've got someone who's a Rhystic Study and they've been drawn 1 million cards and they've used nothing, I'm going to pass on. I'm going to push on them, and I'm going to take my chances. And sometimes I've been burned. Like sometimes I'm like, you've drawn 25 cards, you've used absolutely nothing except for a freaking dispel.
Yeah.
Right. I am sure you have something else to use here.
Yes.
And I'm going to be passing to you. And if you want me to not pass to you, then show me your hand.
Yes.
And they'll be like, well, I'm not showing you my hand. I'm like, well, then I pass.
Yeah.
And then it turns out they had nothing.
Yeah.
And I lose.
Yeah.
But
you have to play that game though, right? Like you have to be able to walk the line of losing the game if you want to win. Yeah.
And to give an example, there's a European player named Tino Sereno. He actually won the UK Championship this past weekend.
Nice. Yeah.
And he has, first of all, he has testicles the size of mountains. Like the guy just, like the guy is just ginormous balls.
Yeah.
And he will sit there on interaction and sandbag it. And he's got this sort of serene, tranquil look on his face. He's like, I'm passing on this spell.
Yeah.
And he does it so comfortably. You're like, I guess he really doesn't have anything.
Yeah.
Because he's just like, yeah. And this willingness to lose the game.
Yep.
To sandbag. Like you have to be able to do that sometimes.
You do. There's kind of a couple aspects to this for me. The first aspect is the poker aspect, like you talked about, which is I'm doing analysis of how many counterspells or pieces of interaction do I believe all 3 of my opponents have in their decks, how many are in their graveyards, how many cards have they drawn, what are the odds, how much mana do they have open, right? Like these are all things that are constantly like rotating in my head, is like thinking about this, thinking about that. And then I can say, all right, there's good odds that, are their commanders out is a whole other thing, like, because that turns on Fierce SWAT. How many pieces approximately do they have in hand, And then the analysis becomes even more clouded when you look at a deck like Kinnan, like Waffles Kinnan, who runs Misdirection and Disrupting Shoal and Subtlety and like all these cards that a normal counterspell suite doesn't include. So you have to be, like you said, it's kind of like a feel-based thing for that, and you have to just have a lot of games under the belt to know when to politic and when to talk. And then the other side of this is high emotional empathy and reads, where you're like, okay, they have not cast anything, they're passing priority. I'm just gonna say, show me your hand, or I'm passing, and then you have to be okay with losing the game in that point. Because if you fall on your own sword there and stop the win attempt, you could just be done, and it would be over.
Still lose.
You still lose the game, right? Same outcome. One is scarier to do than the other. So those are kind of the two lanes that I think this big stack battle sort of operates on. And the people that I really struggle against, like I struggle against politicking and playing the stack battle with Waffle a lot. Like he's probably one of the best people I know and I've played against who can operate on the stack really, really well. Is there anyone else?
He's incredible. The guy's incredible because he is constantly gaining incremental advantage with his politics. Just little edges, and they add up. And he will. He's first of all, he's an expert sandbagger. He's definitely one of those who will comfortably pass on a spell and lose. Like the most infamous, you saw the mind break trap heard around the world, right? Like
yes,
way back, when he passed with the mind break trap and ended up losing the game, right?
Yep.
In a top 4 game that was being streamed live. Everyone saw it, right?
Yeah.
He's amazing at that. But he also, just like I said, he gains that incremental advantage. Like every time he is involved in a stack battle and he's using a piece of interaction, he's making sure he gets something for it. Like, hey, I'll use this Flusterstorm, but give me some information. Yes, I'll use this Mindbreak Trap, but in return, you can't kill my Kinnan. Or like he's always looking for those little edges, so that he comes out of the stack war ahead of everybody else. And he's really good at doing that. And I, like you said, you struggle against it. I also struggle against that. And I'm really trying to get better at refusing those because they're real enticing, right? Like
they are.
Oh my God, please! I really want you to be the one to interact here instead of me, right?
But he's going to gain.
You got me,
right? He's like everything I cast, and this is kind of like the idea of agency in cEDH, where it's like if I'm going to use a resource, I would like something in return. I'm not going to do anything for free. There's no such thing as a free lunch. This Mindbreak Trap has strings attached to it.
Yep.
You're like, well, fuck. Like if we're losing the game, then I guess I won't kill your Kinnan.
Or in you can use it in the inverse way. We could say, I have this piece of interaction. You want me to have it, and I'm going to threaten you with it like a snapback so that I can get my Timnin attackers in.
I don't know who would do that. That sounds like terrorism.
And you're like, I'm like, well, first of all, I don't want my creature to be bounced. But second of all, I really want you to have that snapback in your hand.
Yep.
So you got me.
Yeah. And
I
those
guess I'm taking 2.
Yeah.
And you're drawing a card.
Yeah. Max is talking about me, by the way, if you guys didn't understand that.
Yeah, we had a game, I guess it was like a week or 2 ago where, he had a snapback and he was threatening the whole
for
board.
Like 2 turn cycles.
Yeah, for 2 turn cycles. Like he's like, guys, I have the snapback. Are you going to let me in or am I bouncing your creature?
Yeah.
And we're all like, I guess you're getting in.
And then Max on the second was like, no, fuck this.
Yeah, second time around, I'm like, no, we're not doing this again. Yeah.
Which is,
but then it was
totally correct
thing to
do.
Yeah.
This is just such a complex topic. And I think the last point about this whole sandbagging thing is, where do you draw the line between sandbagging and bullying? Are those 2 different things to you? And just as a side note, with Tino, the UK winner, is he politicking a lot when he's sandbagging, or is he just kind of like calmly passing priority? Like, I'm just curious about it because I haven't played with him.
Yeah, so for Tino, the goal, and he's really good at this, is for him to be invisible. Just fade into the background. I'm not here. You guys deal with this. I have nothing. I'm out. I'm out of the stack battle. I'm going to sit over here and let you guys do your thing.
Yeah.
And to the point where like you forget he's even there, right? And it's magical when he pulls it off. He really does a good job at that.
Totally different than like Waffle, right? Who's talking
totally different than Waffle, right?
Yeah.
Waffle is leading the table. I mean, that's kind of what his role ends up being. Is he's like, you should interact with the stack here, you should interact with the stack here, and he kind of pilots the whole thing for everybody
until he's ready
while getting little incremental advantages on the way.
Silent.
Yeah. Which I try. I do. I'm kind of more like him than I am like Tino, but definitely.
Me too.
Yeah. And in terms of bullying versus not bullying, I mean, I think in general, yes, bullying versus sandbagging. I really think it comes down to, I think it's really important to have good decor at the table regardless, right? It's fine to be trying to push your opponents to do what you want them to do. It's not okay when you're pushing them by making them feel intimidated or uncomfortable. I think that's really the difference. Yeah. Where you're like, if you don't do this right now, you're the problem. Like you personally are a problem.
Yeah.
Right. It's okay to say to them, I think if you don't do this now, we lose. And I think, here's the ramifications of that. It's another when you attack them personally, try to get them to do things. I think
agree with
that's
you.
the line.
Yeah. Well, the last thing before we kind of wrap up and go into like my key takeaways and ask you about yours is, how do you practice like these kinds of interactions? For me, the two that really come to mind are a top 16 game I had in Arizona with Waffle and a top 16 game that I had in Colorado with Wounded. And both those games were highly stack interactive and very interesting. And they were against players who I really think are some of the best and who are going to, win an outsized amount of the time. But they don't happen all the time. Like, those games are not a dime a dozen. And I've come up with some interesting strategies to kind of emulate them. And I'm curious to hear kind of how you do that, or if it's really just like, do I come across them in game, then that's just another learning point for me. Or if there's any practice you do or something like that helps you win these battles.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard question because it's very, very hard to emulate the intensity of those games, because when they happen, they're unlike anything else. Like you can't get to that in a friendly pickup game where you're practicing for fun. It just doesn't happen.
Yep.
You can practice in the sense that you can say, hey, after the game, were you sandbagging? What else did you have? Like, did I read you correctly? Did I read you wrong? Like, you can get some of that information with your buddies. But I haven't found a good way, at least maybe you have, but I haven't found a good way to emulate the intensity of those games.
The intensity, I definitely have not. Being in a top 16 like the top 4 at the NV was like this. Like, it was a huge stack that ended, and it was a really awesome stack battle that I feel like I had prepared for throughout the season. But the intensity is, there's just no way. Like, if with everything on the line, you're fighting for your life, you kind of lose sight of the fact that it's just a game because you're so in it at that point. And it's not like there's a lot of money on the line, but having, bragging rights is really why I think most of us do this. And we want to prove to ourselves and to our community that we're the best and that we can, fight with the top dogs. And from a gameplay and mechanics standpoint, one thing that we did was after Arizona, I was playing with Alex Stockwell. I think you guys have met before. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, and we were in that top 16 game with Waffle together. We were just blown away. We were like, what the fuck just happened? Like, it was a 4-hour game, and somehow 3 blue farm decks lose to Kinnan. That should not happen. There's 3 Bowmasters. How, like, what's going on? And we talked a lot about that game for a while. And then in Arizona, after my top 16 game, we ended up going to the liquor store, getting some drinks, coming home, and then playing more Magic. And we, from like midnight till 5 a.m., we played games, and then we got up for our flight. But the game we played, which was we played, I believe, one game that lasted 3.5 hours after the Mortal Kombat tournament, was we just said, let's skip to endgame of Midrange Hell, and we're going to divide value engines out amongst all 4 of us, and we're going to have like 3 or 4 lands in play, and we're just going to play the end game of Midrange Hell where people have all these resources and the stack battles start happening, and that way you can just skip all the setup and you can get instant practice on how this stack battle is going to happen. And it was horrible. So painful to play. And it literally came down to like everyone had used all their resources and it took forever, obviously. But it was also a really good way to practice something that's going to happen in these stack battles. Kind of like, it's never going to be this bad, hopefully.
That's genius, dude. That's genius.
Yeah. It was
Such
really,
a good
really
idea.
useful. Yeah.
Here, you get a tithe, you get a Ristic.
Yes. You have this many cards in hand,
Yeah, that's
you
fantastic.
get a Bowmaster, right?
Yeah, and that's what you really need to do, because if anyone listening, if you've ever been in one of these 4 or 5 hour games, it's a test of will.
It is,
right? Because everything you do is giving everyone else resources, and the first person to shove is usually the first one to lose.
Yep.
Right? And it's so hard to just sit there through it, and every single spell in the stack creates like all these different timelines. It's like the Infinity Wars or whatever. It's like the timeline splits into 10 different places. Like you've got a tithe trigger here, which causes a Ristic study here, which causes a
Bowmaster
Lothar trigger here, Bowmaster triggers here, and like every single spell is like a game in and of itself.
Yep.
And it's intense, it's exhausting, and it's very difficult, and it's impossible to simulate outside of the game actually happening, except like what you just said, which is genius.
Yeah,
Love it. I'm doing it.
Yeah, definitely give it a try, and let me know how it goes for you. Like, let me know if you felt like it's good. I would absolutely do it with the players that you feel most confident are like the top tier of players you can play with, just because you want to emulate having top 60 and top 4 games against the best players you could play against. But the other thing about this is like it builds endurance, and it's a great way to practice. Like, I wrestled all through high school. And our wrestling coach would say, like, you will never be in as much pain in a match as you are in these practice sessions that we're going to be having. It was true. And they were hell. But they also prepared me so much better than if I had just been like, just whatever, like drilling around and then going to a match and getting clobbered by someone who had really put in all that work. Yeah, really, really strengthening your endurance in cEDH, both for, like you said, like understanding all those triggers. Like, missing one trigger can be the difference between winning and losing a game. Like, that's one mana that you'd have access to, or one card, right? And that card could be everything. So yeah, I think that's kind of like the big main themes of all of this. Is there anything else like we didn't cover, you think, in this session that we should bring up?
I mean, I think we nailed most of it. I mean, the stack wars are cEDH, frankly. I mean, that's where it all happens. I think we covered most of it. I think the only edge that's missing is, the fact that there are some decks and some strategies that avoid the stack altogether. Sisei being the big one. I mean, that's what Sisei specializes in, is where everyone else, is fighting on top of each other. Sisei does it without entering the stack at all.
Magda.
They just they activate, and they just go from there.
Yeah. That's probably why do we spend a minute talking about that then? Because that is super important.
And there's other strategies besides just Sisei that does that. Like, we started the conversation with talking about Aether Vial, Monster Manual, Kinnan Flips. There's a lot of dynamics in the game that allow you to avoid the stack altogether and get around it. And I think those are important, and I think will become increasingly important. And if you can find ways to force that into your deck in a way that doesn't, break things, you can get a real leg up on these stack battles.
I completely agree with you. And yeah, so for me, like, when I think about decks that avoid the stack, like you said, Sisei is a big one. Magda is another big one. Just putting things into play. Both Sisei and Magda they technically do use the stack because there's an activation that goes on the stack, right? And that can be just like a spell. An activation is very similar in that, I'll cast a silence, you'll say Sisei activation, that's on top of my silence. And you can respond to those, Sisei and Magda activations, but they're much harder to counter unless you have spells that deal with activated and triggered abilities. Like, that's why I think Louisoix Sacrifice is one of the best cards that's been printed in a while, because it's very playable for specific decks. Stifle, not a ton. Trick Bind here and there, but really not a ton because it's a 2-mana piece of interaction. But I do believe the other one that is super important to talk about is Rogthras. And the way that it doesn't use the stack is that once you have so much mana and you have discounters, so if you have like a Training Grounds effect or a Biomancer's Familiar, what happened, I don't know if I actually already talked about my finals game, but I had 2 Biomancer's Familiars, a Boro Breeze Caller, 3 lands, and a Cradle that tap for 6. It's over. Game. The game's over.
Yeah.
And we had made a deal. I was like, oh, I won't win on my turn. And I untapped my Urza Saga triggered. I went and got my Expedition map. I cracked it, played my Cradle, played Breeze Caller, and passed.
Oh, it's disgusting.
And I was like, they don't even know they're dead. But it's over, right? Because it's
an important thing to talk about because I don't think people realize a lot of times those Rogthras decks, they get into this conversation with like, dude, I have 2 cards in hand. I only have 2 cards in hand.
I had 2 cards.
Yeah, right. And I'm like, you don't have 2 cards in hand. Your hand is meaningless. It doesn't matter. Count your mana. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, untap. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, untap. 13, 14, 15, 16, untap. Oh, you have 25 mana, right? You have 25 mana, and each Thrasios activation only costs you 1.
Yeah.
So, no, you don't have 2 cards in hand. You have 25 cards in hand.
Yep.
Right? So, you have to, like, you talk about sandbagging, right? I have to say to the Thrasios player, like, I'm not doing anything. Right? This is all you. Yeah. This is all you. You activate until you get an answer, and I don't want to hear anything else. Like, nobody else is doing anything.
Not my fight.
Not my fight, right?
Yeah.
And but that's how these Thrasios, the Rock Thras deck is. That's why it's so good. That's why the Cradle Farm deck approach is so good, because they can plausibly hold up their hand and be like, I have nothing, and force everyone else to interact while sitting there on their little nest of happiness.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that
It's
game
crazy.
in particular was one that, like, it was extremely elusive, because it's like I had 3 cards in hand going into my turn. I had my Saga on 2. I had like 5 creatures, I think, and one of the 3 cards in hand was the Abora Breezecaller. And I was like, the deal is I'm not going to present a win on my turn, you know? And I'm like, that's fine. The deck wins better at flash speed anyways. And I was like, you know, I don't know if they saw the Saga, but it was like crack the map for the Cradle. I'm not even casting a spell. I'm literally cracking this and playing a land. And then the Abora Breezecaller is the only spell I played that turn. And I was like, not only does it mean that I have 1 mana Thrasios activations and 1 mana Breezecaller activations, every time I hit a land off Thrasios, that's 5 mana that I make off the Breezecaller. And any spell you try to put on the stack, I will pay 1 mana and put another Thrasios activation into play. And if that's a land, I'm untapping my Cradle again. So it's like, there's certain game states that are inevitable that you just won't lose that game state. And Rogthras does that exceptionally well. And I do think it is one of the best decks in the format right now.
No question. No question.
And
I think even at this point, it's amazing, because it's been doing this thing for months now.
Yeah.
Months it's been doing what it does, and I still don't think people are interacting with it in the right way.
It's hard
Right.
because well, the mid range is really defined by not interacting with pieces unless they're winning.
Right.
And
with Rogthras, you know, I have to remove your Thrasios. I have to deal with your ability to get Cradle early. I can't wait.
Yeah.
I can't wait till you know, once you've cast the Abora Breezecaller, it's too late.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a snowball deck, right? Just like Winota was a snowball deck. It's like you can't stop Winota. You have to remove Winota before they get a trigger, or the cycle just continues. In the similar vein, I'm curious from your perspective if like cards like, so in my mind, the cards that I think of are Sneak Attack, Aether Vial, Pyre of Heroes, Birthing Pod. I think that's pretty much
Monster
Arnie
Menu.
Metalbrow. Arnie Metalbrow is one that I found recently, which I was like,
nice.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So like these are all cards that put a creature into play. Uncounterably, they do use the stack because you have to activate them. But for like an example of if I play a cool line I've been thinking about with Tim Nadargo is like they're on Rector now. So if they're playing Sneak Attack, I can play my Rector. That resolves. I'll cast Dargo. Sacking Rector is an additional cost. The Rector trigger goes, I get Sneak Attack. I pay a red mana, I put a Grand Abolisher into play. Dargo resolves, pay a red mana, put my Ruthless Technomancer into play, and just win right from there.
Nobody can do anything. Yep.
Exactly. And I'm like, what do you think about these sort of strategies? Because they keep coming to me. Like, the more stack battles I'm in, I'm like, damn, I fucking wish I had an Aether Vial right now. You know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Aether Vial has been in and out of my deck over and over and over again. You know, because on the one hand, those scenarios do exist where they just bypass all of the muck and get you the win. But on the other hand, they also are very complicated, and they require setup. They require that you have the things that you need in addition to that thing. And in a lot of games, you're just not going to have that. And then it becomes a dead card in your hand, and you're better off just navigating the battle that we just talked about.
Right.
So I think it's good to include some of that in your decks, but not lean so far into it that you're relying on it to get there. Because most of the time, you have the one piece and not the other, and by the time you find the other piece, it's too late anyway.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. I agree with you. And the other one I was going to mention is Abhorrent Oculus, which is a really cool card. Are you on that in TNT?
I am not.
You're not. Okay.
I'm not crazy about that card, but I understand why people are.
Yeah, I just it's like it seems like it would be so good, but it's just I can understand because you're like, well, I don't know, I have like 25 creatures in my deck, so my odds are not.
I
great.
run a lot of creatures. Creatures, but like the other day I cloned an Oculus, and it went on for like a couple turns, and I had like 6 lands and an elf.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, this sucks.
What the fuck? It is. I mean, on the upside though, it's like creatures for Cradle and creatures for Tymna. So 3 mana is not a huge. Obviously, it has the downside that you have to exile the cards. But if you're Eldritching or Birthing Pod into it,
yeah, exactly. You just put it into play with the to the battlefield.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, or should we go into like key takeaways that
Yeah, I think
might
we're
be
good. I
for
think we
people
covered
to
a
listen
lot.
to?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
It's a good conversation.
I know. I think we could keep going. To be honest, like I think we could take this hour-long conversation and break this into 10 hours and say like, all right, let's go piece by piece and get like super granular on like all of the.
It makes you want to like let's start up a game and then we can continue the conversation.
Yeah,
like in the game.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Oh, another side note, another thing we did, which was really cool during invitational practice, so like the 2 weeks before the Envy, is we all played with hands revealed for a game. And we pretended like we didn't know what was in the hands, but we would talk through decisions as we made them. And be like, without perfect information, obviously, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm interacting here. And it helps. It's like so useful.
I love doing that. That's one of my favorite
so
things
much
to
info from other players
Yeah.
instead of just talking after the game.
I love doing that because sometimes, you get a hand. Like this hand sucks, and you're doing it with your buddies. You're doing an open hand. They're like, "What do you mean that sucks? That's a turn 2 win." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like, you do this, then you do this, and you do this. I'm like, "Holy shit! I didn't even see that." Right? It helps so much.
I do it in tournament games all the time, where I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna keep this, and I just lay it out on the table, and then other people they're looking over, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, like, or oh, that's kind of a cool thing, like, do you think about that? And I'm like, I know sometimes like I don't do this at all to try and take up time in mulligans or anything, but I'll usually just put it out there because when I shuffle my deck, I don't like putting all the cards from my hand on the bottom. I like to kind of mince them out throughout the deck so I don't draw the same hand again. I've checked with judges. I'm pretty sure this is legal. If it's not, please let me know in the comment section. But I just do that now because there was a time when I would put my hand on the bottom of my deck, I'd shuffle, and I'd see like 3 of the same cards. And so it's cool to talk to your opponents in game about your hands and be like, oh, yeah, I can't keep this, or like, yeah.
Sometimes you get like a little bit of information too. They're like, "Oh shit, I'm so glad you didn't keep that Drannith Magistrate." And you're like, "Oh,
yeah." And you're like, "Oh, interesting." yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about my key takeaways, and then I'd love for you to say anything that I missed or that you thought was like really important. For me, the biggest things about the stack, and just to kind of reiterate all the things we went over, is the first thing is paying attention to what spells and resources are in your hand and on your battlefield. So you have X amount of counter spells, you have X amount of mana. You have to be really diligent about using that correctly in the right moments and to interact with the right pieces. The cascading order of how to interact is generally you want to use your expendable interaction first. Then you want to scale up to the stack breakers, like we talked about, the Flusterstorms, the Mindbreak Traps. Then you want to scale up to, if you have multiple flash enablers, you can kind of sneak one in there. But then it's silence effects. And then at the top, it's your own flash enabler after a silence is resolved. And like we talked about, these can kind of intermingle. Sometimes, the silence comes first and the MBT is the last thing you cast, and then the Born is the last thing after there's no more interaction. But generally you want to have some sort of matrices of like a flow chart of like, okay, I'm not going to cast the silence for the first thing because it's going to get buried. And you have to think a lot about like what's going to get buried, what's not going to get buried. The next thing is being aware of what other players have. So doing the analysis from a poker perspective of, I know that this deck on average plays 12 to 15 pieces of interaction. There's 3 in their bin. They have 15 cards in their hand. That means that, I can't do the math, obviously, but you get to have an intuitive sense of like what interaction they have left. The next piece is looking at what other people have in terms of their own resources. So these engines they've been building all game. Does my opponent have more cards in hand than I do? Do they have more mana? Have they cast any interaction spells in this stack battle? Get comfortable with passing priority when you feel confident that it's not your battle. And take it from the Brits to let it go sometimes and be okay losing games based on that. And then the last piece is just play games with your friends that are intentional. Try to do some games where you skip to the end state and simulate a stack battle for yourself so that when you get into that in a game, it's not super uncomfortable. And you can talk with your friends while you're going through these. You can have open conversations. You can have open hands. You can say, this is why I'm interacting. This is why I'm not. But make sure that when you get to that place and you're with a top 16 or a top 4 table of the best players at the tournament, that you're not there for the first time and completely lost. So build your endurance and work your way there. So those are my kind of key takeaways. Yeah, what do you think?
I think you nailed them. I think all those were on point. I think the one thing I'd add to it is, look for incremental advantage in your battle, right? If you're using a piece of interaction, get a sense for how badly your opponent needs you to do that, and get something for it, right?
Agreed.
Don't just interact, and like make every single piece give you something, whether it be information or guarantees or whatever. Like, don't be afraid to ask for that.
Yeah, capitalize on your agency because you only have so much in the game. Yeah,
Be like Waffle. Yep.
Yeah, be like waffle. Okay, cool. So that's kind of the big takeaways. I so appreciate you joining me for this. Like, this was a really, really awesome conversation to have. More fun and more insightful than I thought it was even going to be. So I really
Oh, yeah, I
appreciate
had
it.
a blast. I mean, like you said,
Nice.
we could sit here and talk for 3 hours. Like,
Yeah.
we could play an 11-hour game while talking about this for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, had a great time.
And maybe we could come back and do another episode where we like do analysis for a game, like a final turn of a game,
Such a good idea.
right?
Such
Like
a good idea.
we just break it down, either one of our games or like one that's like a prolific game. And we're like, all right, how did this game happen? Like, why is this person interacting here? And maybe we could have like some more people on to talk about it too. Yeah, I would love to do
Great
that.
idea.
Cool.
Hell yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then make sure to go check out Max's podcast. Win It In is one of the best channels in CDH, in my opinion. Having these kinds of discussions is not something that everyone does. And I see this happen a lot on his channel, and I watch every single one. So if you want to actually get better at the game, I think it's a lot less about watching, gameplay, which is all, I love all the gameplay channels, and those are great. I don't think you're going to learn as much from a top 16 breakdown or a gameplay as you will theory. And that's the point of my channel. I think that's a big part of what your channel is about. So really recommend going and checking out Win It In. And then the last thing is, do you offer coaching, Max, or do you do any of that?
I don't charge for coaching, but
okay.
I'm always happy to talk game. So if anyone
Sweet.
wants to run some games and do some practice or theory craft, I'm always down.
Yeah. Well, that must be great to not have to charge for coaching. I, on the other hand, do charge for coaching, and you can come and find it from me because I am a broke 26-year-old.
Yeah, well, that's the conversation. Is I'm an old man. I'm the old man in the CDH community. I'm established. I don't need to charge for coaching, and I don't want to take money out of your pocket to to coach where you guys can really use it.
Yeah, get your coaching from Max for free, and find both of us in the Critical EDH League. I think that's where I play the majority of my games. I know that's where I see you a ton, and I'm always happy to jam games and chat with people, as I know you are as well. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else. I don't know when this video is coming out, but if it's before Fishbowl, I'm going to be going to Fishbowl. So, are you going? Are you planning on going?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep, I'll be
okay,
there.
round 2. Heck yeah.
Yep.
And then there's going to be another tournament in 2 weeks after that. I think it's called the Onboard Gaming Gauntlet. So another pretty big event. I'm not sure if you'll be able to make it back down in that quick of a time frame, but for anyone in California, I highly recommend it. It's going to be a really fun event. So yeah, I think without further ado, thank you for joining me, Max, and yeah, everyone have a great day. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you want to win a free deck just like this person did from their comment on last week's video, all you have to do is be a subscriber and comment what your biggest takeaway was from today's video. Don't forget to check out the Win It In podcast and Max's Twitter for even more competitive insights. And of course, follow me on Twitter to see more bite-sized takes. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.